This is the Road Home podcast with author and teacher Ethan Nichtern. Through the lens of mindfulness and engaged Buddhism, Ethan and guests explore culture, art, politics, psychology, and spiritual practice with an eye toward both personal and collective transformation. For more information, visit www.ethannichtern.com.
Hi, everybody. This is Ethan Nichtern. This is a special edition of the Road Home podcast where we'll be sharing recent conversation with the legendary and wonderful Sharon Salzberg from Dharma Moon community gathering, where we also talked about the year-long Buddhist studies program that I'm the head of faculty for online. That is starting up online Tuesday, January 23rd. So more info about that in the podcast itself to come. There's a whole presentation about that program at the end after Sharon and my great conversation on finding stability in an unstable world. So after Sharon and I finish talking, if you're interested in that, you can keep listening and get more of the details. The early bird discount special for the year-long Buddhist studies program ends Friday, December 22nd at midnight at the end of the day. So you get a discount if you get on that. And you can also just sign up for the first 6-week part of the course if you're not ready to commit to the whole year. And then next week, my guest will be my friend and astrologer and Dharma practitioner and best-selling author, Juliana McCarthy. We had a really lovely conversation, which we'll share next week on the wild astrological ride that we've been on in this era and the transition into a new world age. And so the astrology of 2024, what to expect from an astrological standpoint. That was a really wonderful conversation. And Juliana said that we might be living through the most important moment in human history, astrologically speaking, which was obviously a very fascinating comment to start the conversation with. So stay tuned for that episode next week. And also just want to remind folks that our podcast is sponsored by dharmamoon.com. There's great events, downloadable content there, free ebook, great video, Foundations of Mindfulness meditation course that you can buy and download for friends, very inexpensive, with David Nichtern. So go to dharmamoon.com to get on their email list. Go to ethannichtern.com to get on my email list if you want to get a monthly email about what I'm up to, and go to Sharon Salzberg with an E.com to find out more about the great Sharon Salzberg. So with that, here's this week's podcast, Finding Stability in an Unstable World, with myself and the great Sharon Salzberg. Great to see everyone. This is a really hard time of year to gather just because life is so frenetic. End of year and holidays, so really appreciate everyone being here. A few people are sharing where in the world they're from. Where in the world is Carmen Sandiego is my daughter's favorite show right now, so we could, if you want to share where you're joining from, please do. I'm in Brooklyn, New York at the present moment. And tonight, the purpose of tonight and this gathering is twofold. The one purpose is to let people know and have an in-depth share about Dharma Moon's year-long Buddhist studies program, which starts every year in late January, is a 1 year followed by a second year for those who want to go on program that happens on Tuesday nights. And a lot of the faculty for that is joining us this evening, and I'm the head of that faculty. And the other purpose of the night is to have a great conversation about how meditation, mindfulness, and specifically studying the Buddhist teachings can help at a time where the world is so in distress, and so many of us are feeling that stress acutely in our own experience. So I'm honored and always really happy to be able to talk to somebody who probably needs no introduction, but usually when you say somebody needs no introduction, that's when you should take a little extra moment to introduce them. A teacher of mine, a friend of the Nichtern family, a mentor, uh, a kind of superhero in the mindfulness movement and Dharma world. Sharon Salzberg is joining us. For those of you who are familiar with Sharon's work, she's the author of many different books, co-founder of the Insight Meditation Society in Western Massachusetts, has been teaching and is one of the pioneer teachers of mindfulness and Buddhism in the West, and has two recent books that have come out. Her uh, latest book in the Real series is called Real Life, and that's coming out in paperback in a few months. And she also wrote this year a shorter gift book called Finding Your Way: Meditations, Thoughts, and Wisdom for Living an Authentic Life. I really recommend the one of the two that I've read is Real Life, and really recommend that to folks who are interested in her latest work. But I just wanted to bring Sharon on and say thank you so much for joining the Dharma Moon community tonight.
Well, thank you for inviting me. It's delightful to be with you all.
Okay, so the order of operations for tonight is that I'm just going to lead us through a very brief grounding meditation, just because we all had a day, and if you're watching the recording of this, you're at some point in a day on Earth at the end of 2023, and that can be very difficult. And so we can take a moment to just 3 minutes to sit together. Then Sharon and I are going to have a discussion for about 25 minutes. And then I'll lead a presentation at that point about Dharma Moon's year-long Buddhist studies program. And then there'll be time for questions and answers about that for anybody who has further questions about that year-long study. So this will be brief, but let's just take a moment to sit. When you're sitting in a Zoom space, you may find that you need to reorient your body so that you're not looking at the screen. You may want to close your eyes, or you may sit with your eyes open, as we often do in mindfulness meditation. Just feel our body. You can just notice what space you're in. Probably you're indoors right now, so just notice the space, and especially notice your seat and the lower part of your torso. So let's just take a moment to move the mind out of our head, where our attention spends so much of its time. And maybe we can just feel our pelvis and feel the breath in the belly. And just as we're noticing the body outside of the head, just maybe there's a moment to see how I feel right now. Or maybe you just want to breathe and take 2 minutes to just come out of the day, transition into this space, and settle. Let's just sit in our body for 2 minutes. We can just begin to transition back into our conversational space, just having taken those few minutes. It's great when we can take time to practice longer, but those little 3-minute pauses, they definitely count as practice. Sometimes people think a short sit does not count for some reason. So it definitely counts, and it's very useful. So thank you all. So Sharon, how are you right now?
I'm good. It's been too long since I've actually seen you. I mean, really,
I
way long.
know it has. I know that's my fault. I apologize. Um, what what are you finding? I mean, you and I both, you talk to a lot of people. What are you finding people are needing right now in terms of meditation practice, in terms of, how to work with their minds or bodies right now? Like where are people at for you who are interested in meditation? Are you seeing any sort of general trends in people who are trying to practice right now or interested?
Well, I think it's kind of mixed, as always, but certainly there's a lot of anxiety going around, and there's a tremendous amount of um, kind of looking for meaning. Like there's got to be some meaning somewhere because things don't seem to be providing it, in a
Mm,
very ready way. I think of myself like in the beginning of being more isolated, in the pandemic, and so my plans all changed. My expectations were shattered. Everything was different. I was in Barrie instead of New York. I mean, everything was sort of weird. And the thing I kept asking myself is what's still true?
mm,
And it actually is one of the meanings I'm told of the word Dharma, in Sanskrit, usually translated as the Buddhist teaching or the laws of nature or the truth of things. And one of the meanings is that which supports us. Someone needs to mute. One of the meanings is that which supports us, that which upholds us. And so I thought, okay, what am I counting on? What am I relying on? That's the Dharma, of the moment. And that I think is like a prevalent mood. Like, what can I count on?
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So one of the one of the thoughts for tonight, obviously, one of the purposes of this whole year-long program as it's evolved is a desire to create some kind of bridge between, the really widespread, what I would say, baseline interest in mindfulness, or, you know, everybody has a meditation app, right? Um, everybody feels like they're supposed to be meditating now. Everybody's the New York City public schools have a mindfulness program now. Um, they also cut the budget, right? So you always wonder if that's just be mindful and you won't worry that we cut your budget. But so it feels like we're trying to create a bridge here between just having a basic interest in mindfulness and really understanding a deep body of philosophical, spiritual, psychological teachings from which mindfulness comes. Um, and when you say the kind of search for meaning or dharma, it feels like that's really important. Like as you get into working with the present moment, you actually want
Mhm.
some meaning of the universe, of life on earth right now. So, first of all, does Buddhism provide a sense of meaning? I mean, we don't necessarily have a god, or um, does it give us a purpose that way or an understanding?
I think it does. I mean, I think that it's the role of aspiration,
Hmm.
that we actually do have aspirations. We have kind of North Stars that we guide our lives by, we make choices by, that we um, make decisions by and do action from, hopefully more rather than less as time goes on. And so uh, I think there's quite a bit of meaningfulness and it's very real. It's
Mm,
not abstract, or for the next life only, or once you've gotten to heaven or whatever. It's like very real. Like, how are you speaking to your neighbor or something like that, or your child? And can your highest values be manifested in this ordinary little moment? Is where it comes into play.
Yeah, yeah. So for me, I mean, as we get into a lot in this program, right? I mean, there's many meditation practices in the Buddhist tradition, but if we just took, the practice that a lot of people are familiar with, mindfulness of body or breath, let's say, um, it feels like it's the difference between having a practice, which is very, I think, helpful for 99% of people in terms of working with being a human in a human nervous system, but then there's having a path, right? And having a path has some kind of more overarching life um direction, compass, as you're saying, or
Hmm.
North
Hmm.
Star.
Hmm.
What you said about speaking to your neighbors, that seems very relevant right now. Like that the teachings on right speech in Buddhism, right? Which
Hmm.
is
Hmm.
part of the path that all Buddhist philosophical traditions use. Uh doesn't seem to be happening too much on social media in my in my humble opinion. But are you seeing that as well?
Yeah, I mean, I love what you just said about having a path, and there's a sense of a path and what's not the path. Um, because it also reminds me of, like, mindfulness can mean so many different things, and it does mean different things in different contexts and different traditions. But I think the popularization of mindfulness has largely been based on the idea that we practice mindfulness to inhabit our lives. And that is a beautiful thing. As you say, it is very beautiful to actually experience our lives rather than just be in this kind of dreamlike state, and uh, disconnected and so on. And so, um, to actually fully enjoy that cup of tea, because for once you're not multitasking, you're actually
Hmm.
tasting it and you're feeling the warmth of the teacup and so on. But of course, classically, in the tradition of Theravada Buddhism, which certainly I began there and I largely trained there, um, the ultimate goal of mindfulness, while that might be appreciated somewhat, the ultimate goal is not to inhabit our lives, is to understand our lives. It's to understand the roots of suffering and joy, freedom, that which, uh, to use the model I use in the book, that which constricts us and traps us, and that which will open us and connect us. Some basic truths of life which we experience and also, think about and talk about and read about, like interconnection, and like I keep reading about how there's this tremendous epidemic of loneliness, and
Hmm.
and from the beginning, even before the pandemic, I thought reading about the role of social connection and different healing modalities, I thought, can't just be a numbers game, right? Like, I only have 3 friends, I need 15. Must be some inner sense of belonging and connection,
Hmm.
and so there it is, like, what happens when you're really pondering that? It's different.
Yeah, yeah. It does. I mean, the interconnection piece, right? As the community or sangha, that feels like a huge piece that people really have. We know of the happenings of more people than we ever did before because of technology, but it tends to feel, very isolated. And actually somehow even a gathering like this, or an online class, when people actually really get to know each other, it's not as nice in the third person, as in the first person, sorry, in person, to meet each other. But there is there is some quality of actually resonating with each other. And that also, I find, when people I think Lou was talking about this, that there's a day in January that's called Quitter's Day. I think it's called Quitter's Day. Luke can verify this. Lou Sharma, who's part of our faculty for a year-long Buddhist studies. And Quitter's Day, I think it's January 20th, but it's the people who studied human behaviors, whatever resolutions are set, that's the date that most frequently people fall off whatever gym membership or whatever, meditation membership. And I do find that having a community really does, even if you're just trying to practice mindfulness, it really does keep you kind of locked in to that. But it also, I think, changes your view of uh, just being a person, right? To have that support of community, to have friends, um, and that was part of the original Buddhist path, right? You have to have, or not have to, but Lewis saying some report it as the second Friday in January, so even earlier, I think. So you have to have um, a community in order to move along a path of awakening, right? And so that's always interesting to me when people say, well, I tried to meditate, but it's too hard, I can't maintain it. um you know we usually think in this individualistic sense of like, well, you need more discipline, which is not actually true. It's usually you need friends who are doing this, to and when you have that, it just kind of naturally follows. We do tend to do, even in ruggedly individualist country of the United States, we tend to do exactly what our friends are doing, right? So having friends along the path is very helpful.
Well, what I was, really intrigued by is the community aspect, but also the study aspect, because I think they both function in a way to expand our being.
Mhm.
Like there's some lovely quote from the Buddha about if you study, it'll be like an elephant walking through the jungle, cutting a very wide path. And I think back to my own experience, like um, study was not early on in my exposure to Dharma. It really was all about practice, which was important at the time. But I also, as one can, I got very attached to the particular method that I was doing, and uh, from a distance, it looks like, really, you're arguing about, where to watch the breath, if the nostrils or the abdomen, or, my first teacher was S.N. Goenka, who taught what these days we call a body scan, which he called sweeping, and you start at the top of your head and you bring your attention down. John Kabat-Zinn, who popularized it years later, starts at your feet and moves up. And this is the kind of thing people can argue about a lot. And it was only much later, or some later anyway, that I loosened the grip of that kind of attachment and separation. Like I have the best path by looking deeper and learning through study. Well, what's the movement of your attention actually doing? That's not the point. That's just a method. And what's
Mhm.
being cultivated are qualities like investigation and mindfulness and calm and concentration. And then, and actually being able to study those qualities it just opened me so much to realize, well, probably lots of ways to cultivate that, right? And so all that kind of rigid holding on, which is something I think you look at our time and the positionality and the inability to listen to one another and all the kind of holding on that we do. And if we were only in the discipline of let me look deeper, doesn't mean you give up your principles or you become mushy or something, but that kind of narrowness and rigidity is not helping anybody.
Yeah, that's one thing that's very important to me. For those of you who I don't know well, primarily studied in what is called Vajrayana or Tantric Buddhism, but it's been studied with Sharon and other teachers in the Insight, which is modern derivative of the Theravadan tradition, and have studied Japanese Zen. And it is, I mean, just as a teacher and student, that idea of, as you said, the method versus the meaning, or kind of understanding the mechanics of the way the mind works, and then how to apply different methods. So that's something that we bring into the Buddhist studies program too, is reading teachers who study with different teachers and from different traditions, because otherwise you do get into sort of like no, you follow the breath this way, or this is how compassion meditation works, or this is how metta works, which you should be the Chicago manual style of how metta meditation works.
Thank you.
I think you
Yeah,
are.
thank you. And I think, well, people argue with that too, because I was taught a certain way and that's the way I teach. And I don't mind if people do it a different way, but that's the way I know. And so that's the way I present. But, I think losing that kind of positionality around one's practice is really a foundation for losing that kind of intense holding on, and being willing to look deeper. And again, it's not like mush. It's more like, I remember we once brought this very great Burmese master, Mahasi Sayadaw, who was like the founder of the lineage, here to the States. And we brought him to Barry, to the Insight Meditation Society. And people would always ask him these questions that he didn't understand, like, which is better? Or, can I get enlightened if I'm practicing this other religion, rather than Buddhism? And what he would say was nothing comparative. He would say, well, we believe that the essence of I'm paraphrasing, obviously, we believe the essence of the transformative vehicle is the Eightfold Path. So if you see similar elements in another tradition, however they're phrased, that would be something that, is likely going to lead to liberation. And if you don't see those elements, then you might question that.
Right,
Something like
right.
that.
Yeah, and the Eightfold Path also condenses into three basic categories, which I think really sums up. You can pull them apart and go so into detail, right, for many years into detail, but they condense into what could be called practice, right, working with the mind directly, meditative or contemplative practices, study, right, studying the truth, gaining more prajna or insight, um, and conduct, right? How we conduct our livelihood, how we make ethical choices in the world, what we support, what we refrain from, etc. So those taken together feel like a complete path, which is a little bit different than just saying, or it's bigger than, I should say, than just saying let's be present for a few minutes and try to settle down, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely. And it's also, speaking of Mahasi Sayadaw, and now that I'm on this thing about study, we just come to understand kind of the subtleties more and the intricacies and the nuances so much more
Hmm.
when we have a kind of conversation with others, when we have discussion, when we have questioning, when we have study. Study is not like learning something and being able to recite it back at rote. It's really looking more deeply at these issues. So Mahasi Sayadaw came to Barry. He was quite a bit older at that time. He was venerated as the head of the lineage, and he was an extremely placid person. He was just like, which freaked a lot of people out. Like, he was not joking around, he was just very, the joke actually was in Burma, in his center, up in front of the meditation hall. There was a wax replica of him, and people would say it's hard to tell the difference, between him and the wax replica, which was kind of true. But then I found out, in one of the things we study when we're really looking at the path is the role of concentration, the role of insight, or the role, I think you might say concentration and vipassana, or you're seeing clearly, or analysis, however you want to describe it. And for a very long time in Theravada countries in Southern Buddhism, it was believed you needed kind of an extraordinary degree of concentration in order to then practice insight meditation. And insight meditation was considered the vehicle to freedom. So by the time this had come to be like this rigid belief, that meant that the only people who had that kind of time and not having other responsibilities who could practice that much concentration were the monks. There were no nuns in those countries anymore. Lay people didn't have the time. So that meant that liberation, the prospect of liberation, was owned by the monks. And Mahasi Sayadaw and a few of his friends came along and said, well, that's not true. We've studied the texts, and we really believe you don't need that extraordinary degree of concentration to then do insight practice. And so he radicalized everything. He said, in effect, he returned the prospect of liberation to women, to lay people, and so on. So he was like this total radical. And so I said, God, it's like finding out your grandmother was a Bolshevik or something like that. Like, really? Him, you know? But both his discoveries were through study, and also that's a very critical understanding between the distinction between concentration and insight.
Right.
And we get to have that kind of thing when we really look at it.
Right. And that feels also in that story. I mean, that's an amazing story. I'm not sure I ever will become or want to become a wax replica of myself, but it's a beautiful, beautiful story.
I'm sure he wasn't either. You know, we just felt that.
Right. I would like to be able to be mistaken for one. Right. That feels pretty cool. But to have that level of meditative equipoise, but. The other big piece in there is sort of this historical view that is prominent throughout a lot of Buddhism, that the serious practitioners, the professional practitioners are the monastics and the yogis, and that to be studying Dharma and practicing in the world, trying to be, a good friend, good partner, or good at dating, whatever, wherever we're at, or good on our own in the world, or good at work, and socially engaged and volunteering in good activities and politically engaged, that was sort of like a lesser path, right? So this looking for ways where, yes, we encourage people to do retreats and things like that, but to actually come together as people in the world again and again and saying we can study and practice this stuff deeply and apply these teachings to a kind of journey of worldly awakening. That's a big part of what's important to me. And I think that's finding that balance of, yes, we are serious students and practitioners, but we're also not monks or yogis. We go to school or go to work or, live life in the world and take that as the path of awakening. That feels super crucial.
Yeah, well, it's real, I mean, it's not just this abstract idea.
Are there any specific teachings, just because we have just a few minutes left with you in this conversation, are there any specific teachings that you are kind of really turning people to right now with everything going on in the world? Any specific Buddhist teachings or practices that you're saying focus on this because this is where we need to be focusing?
I don't know that I would phrase it exactly like that. I mean, there are certainly very interesting teachings about the Buddha in war, war zones and things like that, which would be, with warring tribes and how he related things like that, which are kind of fascinating. But what I turn to for myself is not is troublesome. It's hard, but it's, I think, fundamentally true, which is the Buddha's simple statement that hatred will never cease by hatred. Hatred will only cease by love. This is an eternal law. And I always consider that kind of quirky because I thought of the Buddha as like Mr. Impermanence, and here he is saying this is an eternal law. It's sort of weird, but that's sort of what I was thinking about, when I said I was trying to understand for myself, like, what's still true.
Hmm.
And I certainly saw the elements of my practice, my practical experience in meditation, which was like 50 years old or something at that point. And I went right back, interestingly enough, to the beginning of like feeling my breath, and it was like still true and still powerful, and all the way through to my loving kindness practice. But it was that statement, because it's troubling in that you think, here, like, really, here, this ridiculous situation where somebody hates me, or uh but I think it is still true. And so looking at everything that means, the ways we use words, which is also a fascinating area of study. Like, why does love have to mean weakness or giving in or
Mm-hmm.
sentimentality or not upholding, a sense of principle or strength? And why does compassion have to mean exhaustion? Does it?
Right.
And that's like another huge benefit. And so uh, that's a pretty potent teaching right there. Just the one sentence.
Yes. Yes. Compassion could be replenishing, right? If we're practicing it skillfully, it could be.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Sharon, thank you so much for coming and supporting Dharma Moon and Yearlong Buddhist Studies, and um, even only seeing you in the second dimension is still a treat, even if it's on a flat screen. Um, we're gonna transition at this point to, we have a nice little slideshow. That's one thing about the Buddhist Studies program. We are getting better and better at visuals and slides, because many people are visual learners. So we'll say goodbye to Sharon a little bit later on, but I just want to transition to a brief overview of the Yearlong Buddhist Studies
That's good. I
program.
want to see that. And then I'm afraid I do need to go.
Hey, so can we get the YLBS slideshow up? Okay. So the first year of the course occurs on Tuesday evenings. And we have three faculty for the first course and three faculty for the second year course. Um, and the second year occurs on Monday evenings, and that is at 7 p.m. Eastern time, 4 p.m. Pacific. Everything is recorded if you ever have to miss class, and the Sangha comes together live. And each class consists of guided meditation practice, consists of usually lecture and presentation by usually two of the faculty members, and then small group breakout discussion, and then large group discussion and Q&A. So that's usually the format for each class gathering. And then we have a discussion forum online. And we also ask people who are doing the full course, the full year long, to turn in their own reflections, brief written, very brief and manageable written reflections on the course material, so that there's a little bit more interaction and processing the material. And we also encourage people to have a meditation practice as we're moving through this really deep overview of Buddhist philosophical and psychological teachings. So each of the five courses is divided into 6-week segments. So it's 30 weeks over the year. So there's a couple weeks breaks between each of the course modules as life gets busy for everyone throughout the year. And then there's a bit of a longer break over the summer. And also we have half-day 3-hour sits that you can do at your own availability. And then we have one closing 3-hour mini retreat for the whole community at the end of the year. So the first course is called Entering the Path. The second course is called Karma in the Six Realms. The third one is called Emptiness and Compassion. The fourth one is called Introduction to Tantra. And the fifth one is called Warrior in the World, applying the teachings to a wide array of worldly topics. In each of these courses, we focus on a different meditation technique. So I just want to move briefly through the courses, if we could slide down. So in entering the path, which is the foundational teachings of the Buddhist tradition, we talk about some of the earliest teachings of the Buddhist tradition, especially those that came from what was called the Pali Suttas, or discourses that the Buddha originated. So the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path, we go through those in depth. The theoretical framework from which the teachings arose, the teachings on self and non-self, which is a very confusing set of teachings, and the path of conduct and ethics as they're taught in the earliest Buddhist teachings. So it's sort of the lay of the land, and you could say the foundation. It's sometimes we say the basics, but I feel like that word has become so misconstrued. Basic means the base, the foundation upon which everything lays. It doesn't mean like less than, which is the way often basic is translated in our current way of speaking. So these foundational teachings are the entering the path course, and then we move on to teachings on karma and the six realms of samsara. So if we could roll down to the second course, and there we work with meditation of metta or Maitri meditation. We work with some of Sharon's teachings on that topic, actually. We work with David Nichtern, who's the founder of Dharma Moon, who's here with us tonight. His book on the six realms of confused, psychological realms of confused existence. He wrote a book called Awakening from the Daydream, which is a wonderful text about that. And we work on teachings of how karma, how habitual patterning actually works, how our conditioned experience of ourself actually works from an early Buddhist philosophical lens. And then we move on deeper into some of the teachings that arose in especially the Tibetan, what's called Mahayana or greater vehicle teachings in the third course called Emptiness and Compassion, where the meditation practice we work with is Tonglen, which is the main compassion meditation in the Tibetan system. We also work with a few Zen teachings. We break down the teachings on emptiness. We talk about the transcendent virtues of working in a more relational space, which is what Mahayana or greater vehicle teachings are all about. And this ideal of becoming bodhisattvas, beings who are dedicating our path not just to our own well-being, but also to trying to benefit other beings and help the awakening of other beings interdependently. In the fourth course module, you can scroll down, we have an introduction to the Tantric or Vajrayana Buddhist teachings. These are the teachings that are sometimes called Tibetan Buddhist teachings, although probably more accurately called Vajrayana or Tantric Buddhist teachings, but they did flourish mostly in Tibet and the Himalayan region. So we work with the idea of that the mind is already awake, that we work with one of the core teachings of Tantric Buddhism called the five wisdom energies, the idea that our emotions contain both confusion and wisdom. And if we understand this framework for understanding emotional energy, we actually transform our relationship to emotions. We work with visualization practice using the Bodhisattva Tara, a few simple visualizations. So introduce the idea of some of the teachings in Tantra of visualization and mantra, talk about student-teacher relationships and those frameworks in Buddhism. So that's what happens more or less in the fourth course. And then the fifth course is really applying the Buddhist teachings to lots of different discussions of knowledge and wisdom in the world. Dharma art as a practice, Buddhism and ecology, Buddhism and economics, Buddhism and political engagement and democracy, Buddhism and racial justice. And that is a more exploratory course where we really get to start collaborating as a Sangha, as a community, to share resources about how the different teachings that we've learned and different practices that we've learned can apply to conversation in a broad array of fields of being a warrior in the world. So that's the first year of the Buddhist Studies program. You can just start with the first 6-week course module, but we really do have a wonderful community. We just finished this past week, actually, and it's really amazing to see how people really come together at the end of a year of study and practice together. And then the second year has all new material, but has sort of a similar progression. The first module, just very briefly, which this all happens on Monday nights, but again, everything is recorded. The Science and Psychology of Buddhism, we use a great book by Rick Hansen called Buddha's Brain. Then the second course, we go deeper into the different philosophical traditions about metaphysics and the mind and reality, and different conversations within the history of Buddhism, different schools of Buddhist philosophy about what is real, what isn't real, relative and ultimate truth. In the third course, we go much deeper into the Tibetan greater vehicle or bodhisattva teachings, working with the 59 mind training slogans. Pema Chodron, who some of you may be familiar with, has taught that a lot. And in the fourth course, where we refocus our energy on the tantric teachings, we focus on the nature of unconditioned awareness and the nature of mind. And then the fifth course in the second year is really where the students take over and are asked to research their own Dharma topic in a book that they read, or articles, something in the world of either a deeper dive into some Buddhist teachings that interest them, or applied Buddhism, Buddhism in Western psychology, or neuroscience. Somebody this year did a presentation on mindfulness as an effective way of, this person was a tennis player, so mindfulness in sports. That was a really great, used George Mumford's work, Sharon's friend. So that fifth course really loved, because people really get to express their own presentation about the Dharma. So that's the second year, but you can get a sense of how the whole 2-year cycle does work. We can move on to the next slide. All right, what can you expect? So we really work with some of the classic teachings, but reading different contemporary writers, and we have a great faculty, all of whom are very immersed in the modern world. So it has a very classic but bridged with contemporary teachings and applications of Buddhism approach. I think one of the big ones is it really does make people's meditation practice more consistent. You get past the second Friday in January with your meditation practice, and that's a huge boon for people who've been in the course. Community and connection, those last two, to really have a sense of community at a time like this, and a place each week, and then as we get together on the board or in mini retreats, of kind of a in the words of my generation, homies along the path of Dharma is really just a huge, what a lot of people report when they give us feedback was the biggest the biggest boon for what they got out of it. So those are the 4 C's that you get from doing that. Here's my bio. You can read a little bit more about me if you're not familiar, and we have a great faculty as well. And so a few of them are here. I think everyone is here tonight except Jackie. So I just, Maho and Lou joined me on the faculty of the first year. So maybe Lou, are you here? You want to just say hi real quick?
I'm here. Hello, everyone. I'm Lou Sharma, based in Charlotte, and this will be my 3rd year of being on faculty for year 1. Just wanted to say that the community is so great in this course, and every year I'm so inspired by the questions, the discussions, what the the student community brings to each of these subjects. So I hope to get to study with all of you this year.
Thank you. Maho Kawachi?
Hi. I think the year one gives you like kind of small steps and a kind of street view of Buddhism all the way through. And when you finish the year one, probably what you're gonna see is like a world map, which is like much more bigger view, which is a great thing to accomplish. So let's study together.
Thank you, Maho. And Panos, who's Mavramatis, who's teaching year 2. You just want to say a quick hi.
Hi. So, yeah, welcome everyone. I really enjoyed teaching this course. Has deepened my understanding a great deal. And so highlights for me include this modern multidisciplinary perspective. In this year 2, we talk about psychology and neuroscience of the Dharma, for instance, along with studying classical topics like the philosophy of Buddhism. And in the last module, it was really enjoyable to actually hear the student presentations and to see how this whole course has become part of all of us. So it was a real pleasure to be part of this group, and looking forward to year 2 next year.
Thank you so much. So we can go back to the discussion, the slide real quick, and then I just want to, if we can go back into the slide, say a few more things. Okay, so the full cost of the program is here for the year-long program. There is a payment plan, and there's actually a new payment plan system this year where you can pay on a monthly basis via Afterpay. And also there is a discount, early bird registration. I believe it ends Friday. And that's $250 off the full price of the program. So that's the early bird registration for everybody who's here tonight. Okay. Keep going. And what we're also offering this year is the faculty and staff of Dharma Moon. If you want to discuss further, if you have specific questions that you don't want to ask in a big group about the program and you want to meet one of our faculty, you can book a free 10 or 15-minute online session in the coming days to ask your questions and just get to know us for a few minutes. So that'll be with one of the faculty or staff. So we'll share the link for how to do that, but that's open to anybody who wants more info about the program. So feel free to come to virtual office hours for that. So that's it. Thank you so much. And thank you again so much to the wonderful Sharon Salzberg. And for The Road Home and for Dharma Moon, this is Ethan Nichtern, and we'll see you next time.
This has been the Road Home podcast with Ethan Nichtern. For more info, visit ethannichtern.com and dharmamoon.com.